The moon hung low over Carson Creek, throwing silver light across the quiet, dusty streets. Decent folk had long since locked their doors, but Eleanor May Hutchkins pressed her back against the rough wall of the general store, heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe. In her trembling hands, she clutched a small carpet bag, 2 worn dresses, her mother's Bible, and $17 she'd earned from years of washing and mending. It was all she owned in this world, and tonight she meant to risk it all. From the saloon next door came Big Jim Calhoun's booming laughter, the sound that made her blood run cold. By this time tomorrow, he'd come for her with the marriage contract her stepfather had signed, trading her like cattle to cover his gambling debts. At 19, Eleanor had already seen what happened to Big Jim's wives: bruises hidden beneath silk, eyes hollow behind lace curtains, and smiles that never reached their lips. She would rather face rattlesnakes and wolves in the wilderness than spend another sunrise under that man's roof. When a cloud drifted across the moon, she made her move. The stable boy, Tommy, had left the back door unlatched. $2 had bought his silence. Inside, the air smelled of hay and horses. Her father's old mare, Buttercup, nickered softly at her approach. Eleanor ran a shaking hand down the mare's muzzle. "Shh, girl. We're leaving tonight, you and me." Her hand shook as she saddled the mare. Every creak of leather sounded like thunder in the still night. She had never traveled beyond the town limits, never slept beneath open sky. But staying meant dying slowly. Leading Buttercup through the shadows, she crossed the edge of town. Behind her, Carson Creek slept on, unaware that one of its daughters had chosen freedom over fear. By the time dawn colored the horizon, she'd put 10 long miles between herself and the town. Buttercup's breathing came hard and ragged. Eleanor stopped by a dried creek bed shaded by a few cottonwoods and slid to the ground, dizzy from exhaustion. The desert stretched out before her, endless scrub and rock, beautiful and merciless. For the first time in her life, there were no fences, no walls, only freedom and the terrible loneliness that came with it. She took a small sip from her canteen. The water was already warm, but it soothed her cracked throat. "No turning back now, girl," she whispered to Buttercup, her voice breaking. Days passed in a blur of heat and fear. She rode by night, hid by day, until her water ran out completely. By the 4th morning, her lips were cracked and bleeding. Every step Buttercup took felt slower, heavier. The old mare was fading fast, and so was she. Then Eleanor saw him. A lone rider stood on the ridge above her, outlined by the rising sun. Broad-shouldered, still as stone, hat pulled low. Even from this distance, she could feel the weight of his gaze. Her hand went to the pistol she'd stolen from her stepfather's drawer. She'd never fired it, but she wrapped her fingers around the grip anyway. The rider didn't reach for his gun. Instead, he nudged his horse forward, descending the ridge at an easy, steady pace. Not rushing, not threatening, just inevitable. Eleanor's heart hammered as he drew closer. His horse stopped 20 feet away, dust curling around them in the morning light. He looked to be in his 30s, with dark hair that needed cutting, and a face shaped by sun, wind, and hard living. A Winchester rifle rested across his saddle. He touched the brim of his hat. "Morning, ma'am." His voice was deep and rough, like gravel and whiskey. "You look like you're in some trouble." "I'm managing fine," she said, though her voice trembled. "That so?" His green eyes, sharp as sage, drifted to Buttercup, who stood trembling, ribs showing through her coat. "Your horse disagrees." "When's the last time either of you had water?" Eleanor hesitated, pride warring with desperation. Finally she whispered, 2 days. The stranger swung down from his saddle with quiet ease. He unhooked a canteen and held it out toward her, but stopped just out of reach. "Name's Jake Thornton," he said, "and you can put that pistol down. If I meant harm, I'd have done it from up on that ridge." Eleanor's hand trembled as she lowered the gun. She took the canteen and lifted it to her lips. The water was cool. Heaven itself. "Thank you," she said softly. Jake nodded toward Buttercup. "Give her some, too, slow and steady." She did as told, watching the mare drink greedily. When she turned back, Jake was watching her closely. "You got a name, ma'am?" "Mary. Mary Smith," she lied quickly. Jake smiled faintly, one brow raised. "Sure you are. And I suppose you're out here enjoying the desert air for your health?" Eleanor's face flushed. "My business is my own." "That it is," he said easily. "But this land doesn't care much about secrets. Kills folks just the same." He studied her another moment, and she felt like he could see right through her. "There's a waterhole about 5 miles northwest. I'm headed that way if you'd care to follow." She wanted to refuse. She didn't trust men, not anymore. But her canteen was nearly empty, and Buttercup couldn't last another day without water. "I can find it if you just point the way," she said stubbornly. Jake shrugged, tipping his hat toward the horizon. "Head for that notch in the hills, bare left at the split rock that looks like a preacher's pulpit. You'll see a grove of mesquite. Can't miss it." He started to mount again, then added casually, "Course, there's a nest of rattlers near that split rock, and Apaches sometimes watch that waterhole. But you'll be fine, seeing as how you're managing so well." He swung into the saddle and turned his horse to leave. "Wait," Eleanor called, her voice small but firm. Jake looked back over his shoulder. "I would be grateful for the company." He smiled slightly, something softer in his eyes this time. "Smart choice, Mary Smith. Let's get that horse of yours some water before she drops." As she followed the mysterious cowboy across the empty desert, Eleanor felt the weight of her fear ease. Just a little. She didn't know where the road ahead would lead, but for the first time since fleeing Carson Creek, she didn't feel entirely alone. The waterhole lay hidden in a hollow of red rock, shaded by twisted mesquite trees that looked as old as time itself. Jake dismounted first, scanning the area before signaling Eleanor to follow. "Let the horses drink first," he said, his voice calm and steady. "But not too much at once. Make 'em sick." Eleanor copied his movements, though her hands still trembled. Buttercup pushed eagerly toward the water, nearly pulling her off balance. Jake stepped in close, his larger hands wrapping around hers to steady her grip on the reins. "Easy now," he murmured. His voice was low, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his breath. Let her sip slow. Eleanor nodded, unable to speak. His touch was sure and gentle, and for a moment, the desert heat seemed to fade beneath the strange flutter building in her chest. When Buttercup finished, Eleanor filled her canteen and knelt to drink again, savoring every cool swallow. When she looked up, Jake was watching her. His green eyes were unreadable, but not unkind. "You never seen hard times before," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Eleanor straightened, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. "I've seen my share." Quote, "Not like this," he said, glancing at the vast, empty land around them. "This country don't forgive mistakes." "Why are you out here, then?" she asked. Jake gave a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Running from something. Or maybe toward something. Hard to tell anymore." He crouched near the fire pit, clearing out old ashes, and struck a match. When the small flame caught, Eleanor felt its warmth seep into her bones. "You got anyone looking for you?" he asked after a while. Eleanor hesitated. Her first instinct was to lie again, but there was something about Jake Thornton that made dishonesty feel small. "No one worth mentioning," she said at last. Jake nodded slowly, not pushing further. "That's probably for the best." They shared a quiet meal of jerky and cold beans from his pack. Eleanor was too hungry to care how plain it was. Afterward, Jake leaned back against a rock, rolling a cigarette with slow, practiced fingers. "You always travel alone?" she asked. He lit the cigarette, the match flaring between them. "For the last 5 years, yeah." "Why?" Quote, Jake blew out smoke, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Because everyone who rode with me before ended up dead or wishing they were." The words sent a chill through her despite the fire's warmth. "You're an outlaw." Jake looked at her then. Really looked, with the weight of a man who'd seen too much. "Depends who you ask. To some, maybe. To others, I'm a man who took justice into his own hands when the law refused to." Eleanor's voice softened. "What happened?" Jake's gaze drifted to the fire. "A man named Tom Carson happened. He liked hurting women. Folks in town looked the other way, until he hurt the wrong one. Someone you cared about." "My wife," Jake said simply. "Maria. She's buried by a creek 2 days north of here." I made sure the man who killed her joined her not long after. The silence that followed was heavy, but not uncomfortable. Eleanor understood pain, even if her scars were different. I'm sorry, she said softly. Don't be. Sorry doesn't change the past. Jake ground out his cigarette, then stood and checked the horses. You should get some rest. I'll keep watch. Eleanor lay down, pulling her shawl around her shoulders. The desert sky stretched above her, a sea of stars so bright it hurt to look at them. She tried to sleep, but her mind wouldn't quiet. The image of Jake, haunted and alone, stayed with her. Jake, she called softly. Yeah? My name isn't Mary. He didn't turn around, but she saw his shoulders tense slightly. No? It's Eleanor. Eleanor May Hutchkins. There was a long pause before he answered. All right, Eleanor May, get some sleep. You've got a long road ahead. When she finally drifted off, Jake kept his place by the dying fire, rifle across his knees. He didn't sleep. Men like him rarely did. The next morning came with pale light and cold air. Eleanor woke to the smell of coffee. Jake was crouched by the fire again, looking as if he'd been up all night. You didn't rest, she said. He shrugged. Old habits. I'll sleep when we reach Culverson. You'll be safe there. There's a train west every week. Eleanor frowned. You're leaving me there? That was the deal. Quote, I don't remember making one. Jake gave a faint smile. I remember making it for you. They broke camp and rode through the morning. The land grew rougher, red rock giving way to canyons and dry washes. Jake pointed out tracks as they went, teaching her how to read them. See that? He said, pointing to faint impressions in the dirt. Antelope, headed toward water. You can tell by the spacing. Light step, fast stride. Eleanor tried to memorize everything, hanging on every word. It felt strange, this easy rhythm between them. She'd spent years shrinking under harsh voices. And now this man, this dangerous, broken man, spoke to her with patience she'd never known. By afternoon, they found another small spring. Jake checked the area carefully before letting the horses drink. You can't be too careful out here, he said. Men kill for less than water. That night, they didn't light a fire. Jake explained that fire drew eyes. Instead, they ate cold beans again and watched the stars. Eleanor wanted to ask what he'd do once he left her in Culverson. Where he'd go. Whether he'd ever found peace for what he'd done. But she didn't. Some questions were better left for daylight. When she finally lay down, Jake's voice came from the darkness. Eleanor May. Yes? You did right running from whatever you ran from. Some chains don't need keys, just courage. She smiled faintly into the night. You talk like a preacher. He chuckled softly. No, ma'am. Preachers talk about forgiveness. I talk about survival. The desert wind sighed through the rocks, and Eleanor felt her fear settle. For the first time in years, she wasn't running alone. Wait, before we move on. What do you think about the stories so far? The next morning broke with an uneasy quiet. Jake stood at the canyon's edge, eyes scanning the horizon. Eleanor could tell by the tension in his shoulders that something was wrong. What is it? She asked, brushing the sleep from her eyes. Riders, he said. Too many to be travelers. Her stomach dropped. Amos? Maybe, Jake said, already tightening Buttercup's saddle. Or maybe that husband you mentioned. Quote, the name alone made her heart race. Big Jim Calhoun. Jake gave a humorless smile. Sounds like a man who don't take kindly to being told no. They rode hard through the ravine, dust kicking up behind them. The wind carried faint shouts. The men were closer than she wanted to believe. Jake guided them through a narrow pass between cliffs, dismounting to lead the horses on foot. There's a cave up ahead, he said. Old Apache hideout. We'll wait them out if we can. The cave was dark and cool, the air heavy with the scent of dust and old fires. Jake checked the entrance, then pulled Eleanor deeper inside. He handed her his rifle. You remember how to use it? Quote. She nodded, hands shaking. If it comes to shooting, don't hesitate, he said. Hesitation gets you killed. Before she could answer, a voice echoed through the canyon. Jake Thornton! We know you're up there. Come out like a man. Jake's face hardened. That's Dutch McCready, bounty hunter, works for whoever pays. Another voice joined his, cruel and familiar. And I'm here for what's mine. Eleanor froze. Big Jim. Jake's eyes flicked to her. You didn't tell me he'd chase you this far. I didn't think he would. He swore under his breath. Stay here. Jake, no. He ignored her and stepped toward the cave mouth. Calhoun! His voice echoed across the rocks. You want me? Fine. But the woman's leaving here alive. Big Jim laughed, a deep, ugly sound that made Eleanor's blood boil. That woman's property. She stole my horse, my money, and my pride. Ain't nobody stealing from me and walking away. Eleanor's anger overpowered her fear. I was never yours to steal from, she shouted. A pause. Then Big Jim's voice dropped low and cold. You keep talking, girl, and I'll put you in the ground right beside your outlaw friend. Jake turned back to her. There's a tunnel at the back. Leads to the ridge. Take Buttercup and go. I won't leave you. You will, he said firmly. This is my fight. No, Jake, Eleanor said, gripping the rifle. It's ours. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then Jake's expression softened. Stubborn woman. Learn from the best. Quote. Outside, men shouted. Boots crunched over gravel. Jake took position behind a rock, guns ready. If I fall, he said without looking at her, you run, you live. That's the deal. She didn't answer. A bullet struck the cave wall, sending dust into the air. The fight began. Jake's Colts thundered in both hands, echoing like rolling drums. Eleanor stayed low, scanning for targets, her pulse pounding in her ears. She fired once, missed, then again, and this time saw one of Dutch's men drop his rifle. More gunfire erupted. Eleanor's lungs burned from the smoke. When she dared glance out, 3 of the bounty hunters were down, but Jake was bleeding from his shoulder. Still, he didn't back down. Calhoun! Jake roared. You want her? Come get her yourself. Big Jim's answer came in the form of gunfire. The man was built like a bear, his bulk unmistakable even in the dust. He advanced on the cave, eyes wild with rage. Eleanor saw Jake reload, slower this time, blood dripping from his hand. Without thinking, she rose from her cover and fired. The shot grazed Big Jim's arm, throwing him off balance. Jake looked at her, startled. You shouldn't have done that. Yes, I should have. Big Jim charged into the cave, firing wildly. Jake tackled Eleanor to the ground as bullets sparked against stone. Then Jake rolled, came up on one knee, and fired twice. The second shot found its mark. Big Jim staggered, disbelief etched across his face. You, he rasped, then fell hard onto the cave floor, the echo fading into silence. For a long moment, all Eleanor could hear was her own heartbeat. Then Jake slumped against the wall, blood soaking through his shirt. Jake! She scrambled to his side, tearing at her skirt to make bandages. Stay with me. He caught her wrist weakly, told you to run. Not without you. She pressed the cloth to his wound, her voice trembling. You hear me? I'm not losing you. A ghost of a smile tugged at his lips. You're a hard woman to argue with. Good, she said fiercely. Then don't try. She worked until the bleeding slowed. When she finally looked up, Jake's eyes were open, studying her. You came back for me. Of course I did, she whispered. You're the reason I'm still alive. He reached up, his fingers brushing her cheek. You're my first, Eleanor May. First person since Maria who made me believe a man like me could still have something good left inside. Tears blurred her vision. And you'll be my last, she said softly, the last man I'll ever need. Outside, the wind swept through the canyon, carrying away the scent of gunpowder and death. The desert was quiet again, vast, eternal, and uncaring. But somewhere in that silence, hope stirred. When Jake could stand, they buried Big Jim beneath a cairn of stones. He won't haunt you anymore, Jake said, his voice low. Eleanor looked out across the horizon. He never will again. They rode slow toward Culverson, Jake's arm bandaged, Eleanor guiding Buttercup through the fading light. As the sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky in gold and red, she glanced at him and smiled. "You realize," she said, "I'm wanted for horse theft." Quote. Jake chuckled. "Guess that makes us both outlaws." "Then I reckon we'll just have to keep riding." He reached across the small distance between their horses, taking her hand. "Where to?" "Anywhere that isn't behind us," she said. He squeezed her hand gently. "That sounds about right." The desert stretched endlessly ahead, a land that took everything from those who feared it but gave freedom to those brave enough to claim it. Jake Thornton and Eleanor May Hutchkins rode into the setting sun, two wounded souls who had found not just survival, but love, the kind that defied the odds and outlasted the pain. And for the first time, Eleanor truly believed what Jake had promised. She had been his first reason to hope, and he had sworn she would be his last.